Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal interesting facts on Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025. First, Trina Robinson had spent sleepless nights piecing together a plan that would give her mother a fighting chance at freedom. Portia Robinson's future was hanging by a fragile thread, and Trina could no longer afford hesitation. The threat was Drew Kane, who held damning evidence that could destroy Portia's reputation and leave the entire Robinson family in ruins. Trina understood that Drew had grown too powerful, too reckless with the secrets he had gathered, and the only way to protect her mother was to disarm him. This realization pushed her to a dangerous decision, to seek help from someone who had once betrayed her trust, Kai Taylor. Kai had been the source of so much pain for Trina and her family. Once, he dismissed her warnings and chose to side with outside forces, leading to consequences that left Curtis, Portia, and Stella deeply wounded both emotionally and socially. His betrayal was not just an error in judgment, it was a blow that fractured bonds and carved scars into the fabric of their family. For a long time, Trina swore she would never look in his direction again, but desperate times forced her to reconsider. If anyone could get close enough to Drew and neutralize the threat, it was Kai. The weight of past mistakes still haunted Kai. He lived with the knowledge that his disbelief in Trina's words had unleashed chaos upon people who never deserved it. Now, the opportunity to make amends presented itself like a lifeline, and he knew he could not ignore it. When Trina approached him, not with forgiveness but with a calculated request, Kai understood that this was his final chance to step out of the shadow of betrayal. If he failed her again, there would be no redemption left for him. Trina's plan was simple in design but dangerous in execution. She needed Kai to infiltrate Drew's circle, find the evidence he was hoarding against Portia, and destroy it before it could be weaponized. Drew was cunning and suspicious, but he also underestimated those he deemed beneath his level of control. Trina knew Kai could use that arrogance against him. The mission was not just about erasing files or burning papers, it was about dismantling the leverage that Drew wielded so confidently over the Robinson family. As Kai prepared for the task, he carried both determination and guilt in equal measure. He recognized that this was not only about saving Portia but also about proving to Trina that he could be more than the man who once failed her. His redemption was tied to her trust, and though she might never fully forgive him, he needed to show her that he was capable of loyalty when it mattered most. Every step closer to Drew's secret cache of evidence became a step toward absolution, but also toward danger. Drew was not a man who tolerated betrayal lightly. Meanwhile, Trina stayed by her mother's side, concealing the dangerous operation she had set in motion. She presented strength to Portia, offering comfort and hope, but inside she carried the heavy knowledge that Kai was walking into a lion's den on her command. She reminded herself that this was not about her or even Kate, was about family. Saving her mother meant reclaiming stability for Curtis and Stella as well, ensuring that Drew could no longer use their pain as a bargaining chip in his relentless schemes. The deeper Kai delved into Drew's world, the more he realized the magnitude of what he was up against. Drew had networks of influence, hidden allies, and an arsenal of secrets that extended far beyond Portia's case. Destroying the evidence was not just about one folder or one record, it was about dismantling a web of power that Drew had carefully spun. Kai knew that if he succeeded, he would cripple Drew's ability to manipulate others, but if he failed, he would not live long enough to regret it. For Trina, waiting was the hardest part. She had placed her family's salvation in the hands of a man who had once brought them so much suffering. Yet, as hours turned into days, she held onto the fragile belief that people could change under the weight of guilt and the promise of redemption. If Kai truly managed to strip Drew of his leverage, Portia would finally be safe, and the Robinson family could begin to heal. But in the back of Trina's mind lingered the haunting thought, redemption always comes at a price, and she could only hope it would not cost Kai his life. Second, Carly Spencer had always been known for her fierce independence and her refusal to soften her views, even when it came to those she cared about. In the unfolding turmoil surrounding Willow, Carly found herself unable to extend the kind of compassion that Elizabeth Baldwin so willingly offered. Elizabeth, with her nurturing instincts and empathetic heart, saw Drew as the manipulator, the one whose constant lies and schemes had entrapped Willow. Carly, however, saw things differently. To her, Willow was not merely a victim but an adult who had made conscious choices, even if those choices were clouded by emotion or deception. Carly believed firmly that personal accountability mattered, and she was unwilling to excuse Willow for decisions that had directly tied her fate to Drew's destructive path. Elizabeth Baldwin's perspective came from her long history of compassion, of seeing beyond people's mistakes, and recognizing the influence of others in shaping their behavior. She understood how Drew's charisma and subtle manipulation could bend even the strongest minds into rationalizing his actions or downplaying his flaws. For Liz, Willow's entanglement with Drew was a tragedy born from trust misplaced, not willful ignorance. She wanted to shield Willow from the harsh judgment of others, to remind the world that not everyone has the strength to see through a practiced liar's facade. Liz's loyalty to understanding the complexities of human frailty set her apart from Carly's blunt and unforgiving stance. For Carly, this issue went beyond Drew's manipulation. She believed that people always had a choice, no matter how charming or insistent the manipulator might be. Carly had lived her life facing countless men and women who tried to control her, and she prided herself on never surrendering her power. When she looked at Willow, she saw someone who had surrendered willingly, who had chosen to listen when every warning sign told her to walk away. Carly's voice, firm and unyielding, carried in the General Hospital teaser, "If Willow believes a single word out of Drew's mouth, then that's on her." These words reflected not only Carly's frustration but also her deep conviction that ignorance could never serve as an excuse for poor choices. Michael Corinthos, always protective of his family, found himself echoing his mother's sentiments more than Elizabeth's. Watching Willow stumble deeper into Drew's web left him both angry and disappointed. Michael had expected better judgment, especially from someone he once trusted implicitly. To him, Willow's choices were not merely mistakes but repeated lapses of judgment that placed herself and those around her in danger. His love for her did not shield him from recognizing that she had ignored the warnings, that she had chosen Drew's words over the clear truth staring her in the face. To Michael, it was no longer about Drew's actions but about Willow's inability to resist them. When Michael confided in his sister Christina Corinthos Davis, his words carried both a sense of resignation and determination. He told Christina that Willow had made her own bed, and now she would have to lie in it. There was no gentleness in his tone, only a hard-edged realism that mirrored Carly's outlook. Michael acknowledged that Willow's heart might have been clouded by hope or desperation, but ultimately, she had chosen to follow Drew despite knowing his history. To him, that made her responsible for the fallout. Michael made it clear to Christina that Willow would not escape accountability this time, even if the consequences were severe. Christina, always torn between loyalty to her family and her compassion for those caught in difficult circumstances, listened intently. She understood Michael's frustration but also recognized the complexity of Willow's pain. Yet Michael's words painted the situation in stark black and white. Willow had made bad choices, and choices came with consequences. Christina could see that Michael's stance was not born purely from anger but also from a desire to shield the family from further damage. He did not want excuses to prolong the chaos Drew had caused. He wanted an end to it, even if that meant letting Willow fall. The divide between Elizabeth and Carly highlighted the contrasting ways people handle betrayal and poor judgment. Elizabeth believed in second chances, in offering compassion to those who faltered under manipulation. Carly believed in strength and accountability, in refusing to let anyone off the hook for decisions they willingly made. This clash of perspectives created tension not just between the women themselves, but also among those who aligned with one side or the other. While Elizabeth worked to soften the blow for Willow, Carly sharpened her stance, determined that no one mistake the truth. Drew may have been a manipulator, but Willow had chosen to listen. As the fallout continued, the Robinsons, the Corinthos family, and all those entangled in Drew's orbit braced themselves for the ripple effects of Willow's decisions. The weight of accountability pressed heavily on her shoulders, with Carly and Michael making it clear that sympathy would not come easily. Elizabeth's support provided Willow with a lifeline of understanding, but it could not erase the fact that many believed she bore responsibility for the chaos. In the end, the story was no longer just about Drew's schemes but about the choices people made in response to them. For Carly and Michael, Willow's responsibility was undeniable, and for Willow herself, the path forward would be one of reckoning rather than absolution. Third, at the hospital, the sterile corridors and hushed whispers of patients and staff did little to ease the tension brewing between Willow and Chase. Willow, visibly worn from the weight of her struggles, finally confessed that she had come up with a way to bring her children back into her life. The idea had consumed her, clawing its way into every quiet moment until she could no longer hold it inside. Her voice trembled as she laid out her thoughts, and though she tried to sound determined, the desperation was evident. Chase, standing at her bedside, immediately sensed the gravity of what she was about to reveal, bracing himself for words he did not want to hear. Willow explained that Drew had presented her with an offer path to reunite with her children, though one laced with conditions and danger. It was not simply a legal maneuver or a plea to the court. It was a bargain, a compromise of integrity wrapped in the promise of family. She spoke with the conviction of a mother willing to endure anything, even peril, to reclaim her children. Yet beneath that determination was a shadow of guilt, for she knew deep down that the offer demanded more than she should ever have to give. Chase listened silently, his expression shifting from concern to disbelief as the reality of her plan sank in. The moment she finished, Chase rejected the idea with firm finality. His instincts screamed that nothing good could come from aligning herself once more with Drew Kane. He reminded Willow, not with cruelty but with clear-eyed honesty, that Drew had already demonstrated the lengths he was willing to go to manipulate and exploit others. To Chase, this so-called reunion was a trap disguised as salvation. He could already see the disaster that would follow if Willow accepted the deal, the dominoes falling one by one until she found herself more isolated and broken than before. He could not understand how Willow, who had endured so much already, could consider stepping back into the fire willingly. But for Willow, the choice felt less like a mistake and more like her only lifeline. The thought of her children growing up away from her, believing she had abandoned them, gnawed at her constantly. She could not bear the idea of passively waiting for the system, for the court, for Judge Eva Heron, to decide her fate as a mother. Every fiber of her being rejected the notion of surrender. To Willow, Drew's offer, no matter how tainted, was at least a path, an action she could take instead of the endless stillness of waiting. She clung to it not because she was blind, but because despair had eroded her faith in every other avenue. Chase countered her arguments with the voice of reason, urging her to stay the course. He insisted that she had already proven her stability, that her dedication as a mother spoke louder than Drew's manipulations ever could. He placed his hope in the justice system, in the belief that Judge Heron would see the truth and issue a fair ruling. Chase's certainty was grounded in logic and morality, but it sounded almost naive to Willow, who had lived long enough in the shadows of lies and betrayals to know that fairness was not always guaranteed. Her experience taught her that those who played dirty often found ways to win. She shook her head, refusing to accept the vision of hope Chase painted for her. As she spoke, her frustration bubbled over. Willow confessed that she did not trust the system, nor did she believe Judge Heron could truly see her as more than the fragile woman who had been broken down time and again. She feared that her past choices, her vulnerability, and the whispers Drew spread would poison any chance she had in court. For Willow, Drew's deal felt more tangible than a courtroom victory. It was within her grasp, even if it meant sacrificing pieces of herself. The very thought of walking away from the offer filled her with dread, as though she were resigning herself to a future without her children. To Chase, however, it was the exact opposite. Walking into Drew's bargain meant giving up the very fight she longed to win. Chase could not deny the compassion he felt for Willow's anguish, but he also could not bend to support her decision. He told her plainly that desperation could cloud judgment, that love for her children could drive her into making choices that ultimately harmed them more than helped. He reminded her that Drew thrived on exploiting weaknesses, and by entertaining his offer, she was handing him control over her life once again. His warning was not only about the legal consequences but also about the emotional toll, how Drew could strip away the last fragments of her independence and dignity, leaving her unable to stand tall before her children when the time came. Willow, in turn, stood her ground, even as tears welled in her eyes. She admitted that Chase's words carried truth, but she argued that doing nothing was far worse than taking the risk. Every day without her children felt like a lifetime wasted, a wound that deepened no matter how much she tried to heal. To her, Chase's advice sounded like surrender, like abandoning the very essence of motherhood. She could not fathom a world in which waiting patiently and trusting the system would be enough. It was not stubbornness that drove her but the primal, unshakable instinct of a mother who would rather risk everything than live in regret. The clash between Willow and Chase in that quiet hospital room was more than a disagreement. It was a collision of two worldviews. Chase believed in justice and the strength of patience and letting truth prevail. Willow believed in action and fighting with every ounce of her being, even if it meant stepping into dangerous waters. Between them hung the fragile hope of two children who were too young to understand the choices being made on their behalf. As Willow's heart ached and Chase's resolve hardened, the gulf between them widened, leaving only one certainty: whichever path Willow chose, it would reshape her life, her family, and her future forever. Finally, at General Hospital, Willow and Chase's conversation unfolded in tense, hushed tones, their emotions fraying under the weight of disagreement. Willow's determination to consider Drew's dangerous proposal clashed with Chase's insistence that she trust in the justice system. The conflict between them was deeply personal, yet neither of them realized that outside those sterile hospital walls, a discovery was being made that would shift the entire balance of power in Port Charles. At the waterfront, far removed from Willow's desperate pleas and Chase's firm reasoning, two young boys stumbled into a scene that would soon consume the entire town. Rocco Falconeri and Danny Morgan had no intention of finding trouble when they wandered along the edge of the pier. Their laughter and casual conversation about school and family quickly dissolved into silence when something unusual caught their attention. Floating in the gentle but murky current was what appeared to be debris at first. Yet, as they drew closer, their youthful curiosity was replaced by a bone-deep dread. The shape was unmistakably human, a lifeless body drifting against the wooden posts of the dock. For a moment, both boys froze, their innocence colliding with the horror of the adult world they had accidentally stepped into. Danny's voice trembled as he urged Rocco to help him confirm what they were seeing, though deep down, neither wanted to get closer. The cold pallor of the face and the stillness of the limbs confirmed their worst fears. It was a body, and not just any stranger from the shadows of Port Charles. Though they could not yet identify her, the grim reality was written in the way the corpse floated. Whoever she had been, her end had been violent, deliberate, and chillingly final. Shock rippled through both boys as the realization hit that they were now unwilling witnesses to something far bigger than themselves. The decision to act came quickly. Danny and Rocco knew instinctively that they could not carry this discovery on their own shoulders. The first name that came to mind was Sonny Corinthos, the man both boys had grown up respecting and, in many ways, fearing. Sonny had always been the figure they turned to, and Chris's reputation for control, for knowing how to handle dangerous truths, made him the natural choice. Without hesitation, they abandoned the pier and set off to find him, the horror of their discovery chasing at their heels with every hurried step. When the news reached Sonny, he reacted with an unsettling calm that masked the storm brewing within him. Years of navigating the underworld had trained him to absorb shocking information without betraying his emotions. But beneath the surface, Sonny's mind was already racing, calculating what this revelation could mean. The fact that Danny and Rocco had been the ones to find the body added an extra layer of urgency. Children should never have been exposed to such trauma, and their safety now intertwined with whatever foul play had occurred. He knew the weight of this would linger with them long after the body was pulled from the water. The authorities were contacted, and soon, investigators arrived to examine the scene at the docks. As the lifeless form was carefully retrieved from the water, Sonny stood at a distance, watching with narrowed eyes. Every detail mattered: the condition of the body, the location, the timing. Experience told him that this was no accident, no misfortune of someone slipping and drowning. This had the markings of a silencing, a message left to be discovered, and a warning about the dangerous currents running beneath Port Charles. Sonny's instincts screamed that the ripple effects of this death would reach far and wide. When confirmation came that the victim was none other than Judge Eva Heron, the impact landed with explosive force. Judge Heron had been a figure looming large over recent conflicts, a woman with power to tip the scales of justice in one direction or another. Her decisions had been critical, particularly in cases involving Drew Kane, Willow, and the fragile threads of accountability tying everything together. To discover her floating lifeless at the pier meant one thing above all else: someone had wanted her silenced. This was not random, and it was not isolated. It was strategic, brutal, and deliberate. For Sonny, the truth was inescapable. He had been in this game too long not to recognize the signs of a hit. Judge Harron's death was not the end of a personal struggle. It was the removal of an obstacle. The fact that her body had surfaced now, of all times, suggested that her rulings, her knowledge, or her alliances had crossed a line that someone powerful wanted erased. Sunny's mind immediately sifted through the list of suspects, weighing who had the most to gain. Drew Kane's name was at the top of that list, but Sunny also knew better than to leap without proof. In Port Charles, the guilty often hid behind layers of manipulation, and appearances were meant to deceive. While Willow and Chase argued about her choices, blissfully unaware of the tragedy unfolding outside, the very foundation of Willow's fears was being shaken. Judge Harron's absence would inevitably alter the course of her case, the custody battles, and the fragile balance of power in Port Charles. What Willow saw as a looming trial to prove her stability might never materialize in the way she expected. The rules of the game were being rewritten without her knowledge, and Drew's influence in the shadows was already growing stronger in the wake of the judge's silencing. Sunny, however, knew better than to let panic guide him. Though his anger simmered at the audacity of whoever had orchestrated this murder, his resolve hardened. He had seen too many wars fought on the docks, too many bodies pulled from the waters of Port Charles, to let this death pass unanswered. To him, Judge Harron's demise was not only a message but a declaration of war. Someone had crossed a line, and Sunny intended to make sure the truth was unearthed. For the sake of the boys who discovered the body, for the town already trembling on fragile ground, and for the justice that Judge Harron herself had been sworn to uphold, Sunny vowed he would uncover the hand that had silenced her. As night fell over the harbor, the weight of what had been uncovered lingered heavy in the air. The boys would be comforted. The authorities would begin their official reports, but Sunny knew this was only the beginning. In the quiet spaces between heartbeats, he understood what others had yet to realize. Port Charles had just been thrown into another storm, one that would unravel secrets, expose betrayals, and force even those who thought themselves safe into the harsh light of truth. Judge Harron's death was not an end, but the opening act of a new nightmare.